Making slabs. So we have our block of clay ready, and we're going to start by cutting the clay. We want to end up with rectangular slabs, so we are going to cut horizontally to get the shape close to what we want at the end. Sometimes your clay might be too dry on the outside and it might require wedging, but let's try without wedging. So we have our block ready, and now we'll start making slabs. There's a couple of ways you can make slabs, and the first method I'll introduce is throwing the slab. First, start by pounding the piece as flat as you can. Usually, the top of the clay is uneven, so I pounded it as flat as I can, eyeballing for flatness. I'm holding the clay in both of my hands, thumbs to you and all the other fingers on the other side, and dropping it on a canvas board. A canvas board is very common around the ceramic studio. You can make one at home. If you don't have one, you can use a board, you can use a cutting board, you can use any surface, but avoid surfaces where the clay may stick, such as if you live in a nice house. Marble countertops can also stain, but also plastic may not be a nice surface because the clay will stick too much. Now, I'm using a little more force in my first few drops, and it starts to stretch the clay in the direction that I dropped the clay. It's getting wider or narrower towards me because clay has memory. It only moves in the direction that you guide it to move. So if you want a wider piece, you rotate it 90 degrees and keep on throwing. And now this is stretching in the opposite direction. It's becoming more square shape. At any point, you can pound the clay to flatten it out. And as your slab becomes thinner, you can use lighter pressure, almost just dropping, letting the clay fall. This will prevent ripping. You can use any other boards, and here are some examples. Old cutting boards that you don't use. Maybe you have shelves, extra shelves for bookshelves at home lying around. These can all be used for making slabs. Now, this is my slab from previously that I will stretch out using these regular wooden boards. My clay is stretching longer. And one thing with things other than canvas boards. Wooden boards are great, but the clay has moisture, and the longer you spend time on the board will absorb the water and your clay will start sticking to the board. It'll be harder for you to throw your slabs. So if you see that happen, flip it over and start stretching on a dry surface again. You can use the table, you can move it around. Another way you can make slabs is by rolling it out using a rolling pin and 2 wooden sticks, and I call these slats. So basically the idea is that you roll the piece of clay with the rolling pin in between the slats, and the thickness of the slats determines the thickness of the slab. I start by pounding the clay and start by rolling the clay from the middle, then start making it shorter and longer. Before it becomes too thin, use your slats and roll the rolling pin on the slats with the clay in between. This way, the slats prevent the piece from becoming thinner in areas, and you can roll this fairly evenly using this technique. Now it was a little harder for me to roll the pin towards my body, so I flipped the board and now I'm rolling out the clay away from my body. You can pound any large or higher areas that are hard to roll. You can pound with a rolling pin. Now, the slats you might not have at home, you can make them, but you can also find things at home such as magazines, hardcover books, anything with even thickness and hard enough for you to be able to roll your pin smoothly on top. So these magazines are a little thinner than my slats, so now I am rolling the slab even thinner by using thinner magazines instead of my slats. You can keep making your piece thinner by changing the size or the thickness of your slats or anything you're using in between, or sandwiching your clay in between. If the books are too short, you can move it around as you stretch or roll with the rolling pin and keep on going. You'll end up with a nice, even, flat slab.